nominations just came out. Kind of interesting, especially when you're talking the blues or the rock categories. So, Willie, what I want to know from you, do you think the Grammys are still relevant in terms of finding out and determining what the best music is in a given year? And do they still really matter in the scheme of things?
It's a good question. I think they do. They do to an extent, and I think they always will to some extent. I think that their choices have been questionable. I think it's the same with the Oscars. I think it's just personal opinion to a degree. I think where they've suffered a bit in recent years is that with album sales, pure physical copies dropping, I don't think that having a Grammy to your name necessarily has you move more product or get more people in your seats at shows. In that regard, I don't think they're as important. I do think they're still important. They're a big night. I think a Grammy still means something. To be nominated for a Grammy is a big thing, no matter how much people go ahead and malign them. It's key. The nominees are quality. They are, even if they're not always your cup of tea. I think that they have taken a hit, mostly because, once again, technologies. They're one of those things that is less necessary. As far as blues goes, Pete, and blues rock, this is a bit of a down year. Last year was pretty good, I thought, in a couple of the categories, and also in rock, which I think blues rock should be represented there. This year, there's a dearth. What happened?
Well, I don't think it's so much a down year. I just think with the Grammys, they cast a certain net, and the net that they cast is not very wide. So you look at Blues Rock Review, every year we do the top 20 albums of the year. And I think that is kind of a better indicator for this music than the Grammys is. And that's not to take anything away from any artist that gets nominated for a Grammy. I think those artists deserve credit. But again, the Grammys aren't necessarily casting that wide of a net. Whereas something like with our top 20 list, you're getting a lot more artists involved. A lot more artists are getting heard. Whereas with the Grammys, a lot of the time, it's kind of like the same artists year in, year out that get nominated for the Grammys. I mean, think about this. Joe Bonamassa has 24 number one Billboard blues albums. How many Grammy nominations does he have? He's got two, one as a solo artist and one with Beth Hart. That's 24 number one albums. And he's got two Grammy nominations and just one of them as a solo act.
The math isn't great there.
So the Grammys they have their artists that they pick, and it's kind of year in, year out, a lot of the same. I will say this. I think last year the Grammys actually did a pretty good job in terms of the blues and rock categories. Last year you had Gary Clark Jr. nominated. You had Christone Kingfish Ingram. You had Larkin Poe, Robert Randolph. I think they did a pretty good job.
Rival Sons was in there too,
I think. For rock, yeah. This year, there's not a whole lot of correlation between the Grammys and what's nominated for Blues Rock Review's top 20 albums. You've got Fantastic Negritos on both of those. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of correlation. And the Grammys, it's just kind of same old, same old. They're not getting out to a lot of different artists. They're not casting out that net very wide. And it's just kind of disappointing. I will say this, there are people that bash the Grammys, but I think a lot of those people would still be very happy to have one. So I think it definitely helps, and it's definitely still prestigious, just not necessarily the best indicator of what's come out in a given year.
Right. Well, you were saying just about who the Grammys love. Let's take a look at this. I have a list here because when we talk about just the blues, we have traditional and contemporary. Let's take a look at the traditional blues. All right. We've got All My Dues Are Paid, Frank Bay, You Make Me Feel, Don Bryant, That's What I Heard, Robert Cray and his band, Cypress Grove, Jimmy Duck Holmes, Rawer Than Raw, Bobby Rush. I've listened to all five of those albums. They're all great. They really are. I will also tell you that those artists are a good deal older than most other categories. Nothing wrong with that either. I wonder if the Grammys get a little bit confused that the idea that traditional doesn't mean that we can't have younger artists who are getting praise for that category. I can think of plenty of albums. I know you could too.
It's just so weird because it seems like the Grammys just kind of blacklists certain artists for whatever reason, and they're just not even really considered. And it's unfortunate, but
it's hard.
it's just
And I
kind of
think
the
that
way it is.
on the other side of it, Fantastic Negrito, this album is really wonderful this year. I think it's very unique. I don't know if it's even contemporary blues. Grammy seems to pick either we're talking the traditional blues that your parents or even older think of. And then I guess in the contemporary award section, it can be just about anything. The whole middle section that we think of as blues rock, you got to get sort of lucky to get thrown in there. But
You know
I can
what?
tell you,
And this is why we have the top 20 albums of the
right.
year on Blues Rock Review. It's to let people know that there's great music out there, and it's to show appreciation for a lot of those artists. And that's why we do it with a fan vote and a staff vote. So
Yeah.
fans count for 50% of the vote, and then our writers count for the other 50%. And
you
we
don't
really
have
kind
to
of
work
cast a
the
pretty
Grammys.
wide net that way.
Right.
So a lot more music is considered.
Right.